look, without prejudice to this man's innocence or guilt, is it at all surprising China might want to install agents at Westminster if they can?
No, I think China's really, well, first of all, I think Britain in general has become a bit of a target for China, but also Parliament has. If you look at it through Chinese eyes, you see a securocrat kind of formation building. You've got Tom Tugendhat, ministry, security minister. You've got Alicia Kearns. You've got people on the backbenches, like Ian Duncan Smith, who may indeed not stand each other. I think there's quite a lot of tensions between all these people themselves, but they're all united in the idea that that China is a big problem, a big strategic problem, and so China would naturally want to. If I can't believe that a relatively junior parliamentary researcher is a kind of Beijing master spy, but I can see that there would be an interest in a kind of some spies work as anthropologists. They do networks. They work out who talks to whom, where influence flows to and from. And I could imagine that would be useful for them.
Yes, I mean, gossip, apart from anything else, has its value. Yeah. Now, look, I know this is by definition a difficult question to answer, but what is known about Chinese spying in Britain? I mean, whether it's through technological eavesdropping of various kinds, whether it's security or industrial, or whether it's the use of agents.
Yeah, it's all of those. It's and it sort of began. I've been looking at this for a long time, and it began with commercial espionage, stealing of intellectual property, and they actually probably penetrated university communities much earlier than they penetrated, I don't know, political party structures, for example. But it's of course moved on incredibly, and there have been different evolutions. So, for example, 300,000 Hong Kongers moved to Britain, and then there was no doubt a meeting in Beijing, or several meetings, worried about what that would mean, whether there'd be some kind of opposition, public opposition, organized opposition, made up of these Hong Kongers, or at least some of them. So there's been a lot of spying on them. And there's been reports of police stations, informal police stations operated by the Chinese security services. So I wouldn't say they're everywhere. I don't want to get people nervous about this. But, I share Chris Patton's view. I'm not particularly surprised about it. I'm just surprised that it should only be a parliamentary researcher.
Now, Roger, what is your thought on this question in and around government, of whether or not China should be determined, should be judged to be a threat to this country? How meaningful is that question?
Well, I think the problem lies in the word threat. I think it's... I would call it a bad faith actor. Yeah, it's, in other words, it's not someone we should trust insofar as you can personify a whole country.
And that much is obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. But it nevertheless expresses some of the complexity of the problem. Of course, we want to do business with China, and of course, China presumably is part of some solutions sometime in the future. But the truth is, you need to deal with a threat or a challenge from a country like China, which is across government.
Yes.
Yeah, that's across government. So it's not just their secret service; it's a whole thing. You need an across government response.
And is there such a thing being put forward by anyone in this debate that amounts to a coherent idea of how you should deal with China, whether you're on the more hawkish side or on the more less hawkish, dovish side?
Well, what we're getting is a bit of a patchwork answer. But to talk in basic cliches, the answers are transparency, resilience, vigilance, all these things which sometimes slip away in the great debate. One thing that's clear is the Official Secrets Act is not really fit for purpose. it does really need to be amended, and we do have a National Security Act coming in, which will make it easier to prosecute foreign spies. This is good. But it has to be a little bit more than that, because the national security environment has changed so radically. So one thing that's coming through the system is a register of foreign interests, in which anyone seen as being directed by a foreign government has to be registered. Now, America's got that, but it's got it for lobbyists. Australia has got it, and Taiwan have got it, but in a much more nitty-gritty way than the Americans. So, on the whole, one should be following the Australian model of how to do this, and according to the Australian model and the one we will adopt, if you should be on the register and you haven't declared yourself, then you've committed a criminal offence. So that's already a beginning. Yeah, that's already forcing a degree of transparency on the people trying to penetrate the system.
Otherwise, the ideas on this is pretty much a work in progress on all sides.
Yeah,
Roger Boyes, thank you so much for joining us. Roger Boyes, Times diplomatic editor.